live and what's the word? Teaching styles. Teaching styles. In the West, martial arts, both Eastern systems and Western systems, seem to be taught in most so-called gyms or dojos. Most of them seem to adopt the teaching style of a quite, maybe almost like a Western school system, quite rigid and quite hyper pedantic or complex. So to use a Western phrase here, Occam's razor. Now, there's another way of saying this, which is the Soviet pencil versus the American pen, which was an experiment in the Cold War era where the Americans spent millions of dollars on a anti-gravity pen and the Russians spent $1 on pencil. So, the streamlined, because I have a sort of engineer's brain um, in my genetics, so I like to go for the sort of streamlined approach rather than the hyper complex approach. Western boxing does this. Wing Chun does it, and Western boxing. Authentic Wing Chun. I'm not talking about Mac Dojos, like old school, proper, authentic, organic Wing Chun and Western boxing and Western wrestling, certain systems, or certain dojos, because again, you'll find variation, but in general, Western boxing, real Wing Chun, and Western wrestling do this. So there's quite a mainstream. There is also the sort of military style WMA or military style HEMA. So the military style WMA or HWMA is again this direct sort of like the Soviet pencil or Occam's razor, this direct sort of approach. Okay, George Silver talks about this, but there's got to be maybe not a gross oversimplification, but also not a gross pedanticization. So it's got to be teaching sports combats, or so it can be Ludo or karate or BJJ, right? Or Thai boxing, like MMA. So it can be like MMA or BJJ or Ludo throws, right? But generally, the way it's taught in the West, whether it's an Eastern or a Western system, the way it seems to be taught is wrong. I'm sorry to say, but through being through so many classes that have been through TKD, WMA, HWMA, historical Western fencing, all this stuff, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, Aikido, etc., etc., etc. Through observing all these different classes, the 80 to 90% of these teaching styles are very pedantic to the point of non-productive, of like putting the brakes on oneself. So it's not productive. So just if it's a block, just do the block and refine it later. So a pak sao, just do the Western word for pak sao, just a parry. Okay. If it's an ogoshi or a nogi ogoshi, a cross buttocks in Western wrestling, which is that is pretty much a nogi ogoshi or a Western ogoshi. That would be an example of streamlining of Occam's razor or Soviet pencil, right? A direct streamlined approach. Okay, ogoshi, just load the hip and then sort of lean forward, kind of thing, right? Or a lead jab, or cross cutting in Central European style saber. Okay, it's a sort of engineer style thinking attitude, an engineer's approach, right? Of a direct approach and a pragmatic, efficient approach. So I see too many, and again, this is lots of systems that are taught within Western society, whether it's Japanese Ludo or Western boxing or Western fencing. Like there's this hyper pedanticness. So it's trying to get I don't know where it comes from. I do think it comes from the Western school system, but it's very OTT and very non-productive. So it's trying to get everything to the nth degree and all the decimal places to the nth degree. It's completely pointless because it'll never happen in sparring. So you practice the way you spar. So if you do a technique standing static, or whatever, then you do that same technique the way you spar. So if you shadow box with visualization, you do the same you spar. Right? I'm not a Western boxer, but from what I have gathered through observing it from a distance, that's what you do. You the static practice and the applied practice, you have to do them the same. So whether it's the warm up or the actual randori or komite or sparring, do them the same, especially in the ND community. That's very extra, especially because it's going to be very hard to, try and separate the brain from kata and sparring where it's chaotic. So go for the direct approach, right? Western style teaching within sports combat and martial sport is and anything of that is wrong. It's too. It also takes away the confidence of the student. The student needs to be, again, it's not what you do, it's the way you do it. The student needs to have that confidence that you can not blag, but you need to be able to. You can sort of use mental toughness or psychological toughness, mental strength to sort of push through things, even if your technique isn't that perfect. So it's not the hyper pedantic sort of Western style of teaching martial sport, combat sport, martial art is incorrect, because it takes away the confidence from the student and it makes them, I hate to use the word gaslight, but it kind of does do that. It makes them not even know if they're correct or not, and it makes them double second guess themselves internally constantly. They're like second guessing themselves, like in a vicious circle. So it's not productive. I'm sure it's not deliberately pre-planned that way. I'm sure people mean the best, but it's not. So I think if it's, as I say, a direct approach. It's and also, so point A would be a direct approach. Point B would be spar the way you do your static practice or your warm up practice. So if you do uchikomi, like where you're both standing on the spot, you do that the same as sparring, as kumite, as randori, as karate, as Western boxing, etc., etc., etc. You've got to do it, as I say, especially for the ND community. You've got to, but anyone, even all people, you've got to have consistency and also pragmatism. Again, the direct method, not. It's just, again, I know it's not meant that way, and it comes from the Western schooling system, but it's not helping. It just makes the people have no self ability when they're doing the sparring. When the coach or the sensei is not standing over their shoulder, they have no self assuredness, self-confident abilities. So it needs to be a teaching thing where the person can be with such self-assuredness in a, not in an arrogant way, but in a constructive way, that they're able to do the thing on their own, like passing the baton and running, or passing the torch in sprinting, or marathon, or whatever it's called, relay. Got to be again a direct sort of streamlined approach, not too grossly oversimplified, but again a middle ground between too rigid and too oversimplified. But it's got to be a direct approach. So it can't be, and again you see this in so many systems, whether it's historical Western fencing within the WMA, or whether it's whether it's WMA historical fencing, or whether it's Japanese Ludo or Ludo throws or Western boxing, Western wrestling, you've got to start with a streamlined approach or semi-streamlined. As I say, there's always room for a healthy middle ground. But the thing that I see in so many classes and so many sessions, right, of multiple systems throughout the years, is I've seen people, they go put your hand at 3.997 degrees and then put your right foot at 9.777 degrees and then put your left toe at 4.44373 degrees. And the person's head just explodes, as anyone would. And as I say, even if the person accomplishes that to 100-degree accuracy or a 99.9 degree accuracy, 99.99% of that knowledge goes out the window with sparring methods. So spar the way you static practice. So if you're standing still with a warm-up, or if you're both doing standing still on the spot with the throws versus moving up and down, practice static the way you would practice sparring. Always apply the same mindset method to each scenario. Like the teach a man to fish Bible proverb, always apply the same method, so that way you've got a universal internal that can be applied to different settings. So the eye of the is it tornado, right, is orderly, but the outside edge is chaotic. So always, from what I gather from expert weatherologists, right, the inside center, the eye, is orderly, and then the outside edge is chaos. So keep the universal principles inside, the psychological mindset principles, keep them constant, and then whatever external system you're doing on the surface will go much smoother, much better. So again, I would probably need a student / sparring partner, dog's body, to be able to show these techniques. But it's just, and as I say, I think NTs and all people can get away with it more, but I think even within their community, I think it just is confusing. And I understand the way NTs use language in the NT community and NT culture is different and is vague to the point of causing like conflict, but like aggression, but also conflict. Like it's so vague that like, no, even in their culture they don't know what it means almost. So it's got to be, again, pragmatic, direct, streamlined, without going to the extreme end of gross oversimplification. So we don't want to go too extreme on the linear sort of mindset, but at the same time, this pedantic sort of thing is just hasn't worked. I've seen it in too many classes. So really get, as I say, it's probably, and Western wrestlers talk about this, right, a lot, about that mindset, mental toughness, mental strength, right. Western boxers also, right. So definitely have that as the number one goal, and then apply it to things. So it's not, if the person can get 80% of the technique, whether it's a throw, a Ludo throw, or a sword straight lunge, whatever the external thing is, the internal mindset is like, if they can get 80% of it right, then I think that's good enough, at least for the, say, mid-term to short-term period. At least for those two time frames, it's it's good enough. On the very long term scale of things, yeah, we can look at developing details and getting more complex. But on the, as I say, the mid-term to the short-term kind of time frame scales, keep it direct. And yeah, because as I say, all it's done is cause confusion, and then 99.999% of it goes out the window when sparring happens. So, and people just do their instinctive techniques if they've got very strong legs and weak arms or weak hands, then they're going to do a leg move. If they've got vice versa, not good legs but really strong hands, they're going to do a hand technique. If they're left-handed, they're going to do a left-handed maneuver. If they're right-handed, they're going to do a right-handed technique. As I say, instinct kicks in, and especially in Ludo throws and especially Western boxing, instinct just kicks in, and you'll just see the person do their favourite move or whatever they're, as I say, left or right-handed, or leg fighter versus hand fighter or arm fighter. So they're going to go to their strongest position and strongest setting. So in order to train that out with people, not train it out, but in order to train them to have more variety rather than just doing the one move that they favour them as, in order to gain them a bigger thing, you have to again get that self-confidence and not be over pedantic. Again, maybe say like one or two or three like raw bullet points is fine. After that is too complex. Like 5 or 10 or 25, then the brain just mushes up. Yeah, so like 1 or 2 or 3 is fine, but not anything much greater than that number, because then yeah, it needs to be. And as I say, just to keep to the midterm and between midterm and short-term timeframes, 80% efficiency is good enough for the technique. And as I say, it doesn't really matter because instinct and all these things are going to be 99.999% of the situation. And as I say, the way to try and overcome that in as much as possible and gain repertoire rather than just doing the one instinctive favourite move, the way to overcome that is self-assuredness and self-confidence and mental toughness and all these things which don't develop if the person is constantly unsure of their own self and unsure of their own technique. Yeah. So when it's constantly overcorrected, constantly all the time, it causes nerves and nervousness. So as I say, yes, in the ND community especially, but also in the NT culture also, just to a lesser degree, but I think to a smaller degree, it's still, even within that culture, it still causes quite a level of confusion. So that's really the ending time of that, but it's just to say that over observations of years, it just hasn't really, and I have heard on rare occasions, I have heard from certain, sifus or senseis in modern martial arts, MMA, and traditional as well, say, but again, it's quite towards the rare end. It's 90% wouldn't do. It's quite a small percentage, but there are a small handful that would say this is true. That it's not so much what you do, the way you do it, and nuance, and also on top of that is imbuing the person with again, teach a man to fish, not giving them one fish per day. So that mindset, that mental toughness, and that attitude, that mental strength and mental toughness and then it can be applied to universal things on the external side. So just to wrap up, it's got to be as I say, semi-streamlined, because as I say, you don't want to go so basic that it's just like completely stuck in the mud kind of thing, like caveman style. You don't want that, but semi-streamlined needs to be, yes, a healthy middle ground between technique and directness, but it needs to have that straightforwardness, at least partial straightforwardness, yeah. Because as I say, not only does it all go out the window, 99.999% of it goes out the window with sparring, but aside from that, there'll be no confidence, and that's not really the goal, as I say. So I see the Western style teaching within dojos and gyms and whatever we call them as non-productive for the most part because of that mindset, and they're all almost all roughly the same, near identical, you know. As I say, apart from a tiny percentage of exemptions, that they're almost all on that pathway, whether it's subconscious or not, pre-planned or subconscious. It's not. So I'd say the new style is to just, a channel talks about this as well. I've seen the channel talk about this where they had a person who, as I say, could do a ludo throw, but in a modified way because their body posture was or their flexibility was an issue, or their height, maybe they were, a certain frame size or whatever, and they couldn't maybe do the very, perfect style, so they had to go for a bit more of a modified approach, and it worked. And as I say, if you get 80%, 80% correct, then that's fine. It's because, as I say, it looks nothing. The applied version and the pure version look nothing like each other, so it's non-productive. Unless if you're doing kata, then yes, fine. If you're doing nagi no kata or ludo kata or karate, then yes, the technique, then yes. Even then, to a degree, because of the human body and things, it's just there's going to be certain movements where it just moves the way it wants to in a certain way. Yeah. So it lacks the other thing very quickly for the last sort of 1, 2, 3 minutes. Very quickly, it lacks natural movement. So the particularly Japanese ludo is quite bad for this, and Japanese mainline karate is quite bad for this. And as I say, in combination with the Western style method of teaching martial arts, it's quite bad for lack of natural movement. It's quite bad on this. So if I can position this so that things can be seen better. So if it is it's an unnatural movement. So Western wrestling and Western boxing get the natural movement much more correct. I'm sorry to be whatever on that. I'm sorry people don't like that, but it is how that is. I'm afraid a cross buttocks, a no-gi ogoshi or a Western ogoshi is quite a natural movement. Okay, this where, and again, I'm not saying don't do it. It's fine. People want to train that style, but this thing with the elbow underneath, right? If an arm fighter or a hand fighter, you haven't got huge giant arms, right? Then it's not really, again, yes, there are exceptions and outliers, and also with practice and training, you can improve this, no matter who you are, that's all true. It's not this, because when the arm is away from the body, it's not as strong. So Wing Chun, BJJ, Western boxing, yeah, these parries, when the arm is tight, okay, when the arm, the forearm, the elbow, when these are tighter to the body, these are strong, and when they're out, they're not as strong. So when you do like a Taio or an Uchikomi, Taitoshi or an Uchikomi, where this is what they call the judo elbow or judo forearm, when it's in the armpit or the ribs, right, and you're lifting, that is putting pressure. And as I say, unless you are the arms are just your giant arm, the kind of person, right, genetically specialized or whatever. And if you're not that, and again, yes, anyone of any size with hard practice and hard work, that you'll get there. But in general, it's just the shape is not as strong a shape, right? So that shape, again, it's tradition and it's good on that side, on the culture side and whatever. But in terms of efficiency wise, it doesn't make any sense efficiency wise, because when it's away from the body, it's not as strong. Okay. So again, culture wise and tradition wise, fine. But efficiency wise, no. Because as I say, and also you're loading that, right? So you put it, what they call judo forearm or judo elbow, when you put that in the ribs or the armpit and lift it. Again, it looks nice and traditional, but it's not efficient and it's not common sense, right? It's anti-natural movement. It's against the natural movement. The body, this is where Kung Fu, real organic Kung Fu, real Kung Fu, right? Old school Kung Fu, not Hollywood or Hollywood style, whatever, yeah, or movie style or Mac Dojo or anything. Okay, I'm talking about the real stuff. You can read about it or study about it. Okay, the old school stuff before it got watered down, the real stuff, which is only what I'm talking about, not the Hollywood style, the real stuff. Okay, which if people want to read about, they can. If they choose not to, then that's not my issue. Because the information's out there, can be read on internet or on books or audio book or any kind of sources. Okay. The thing and Western boxing and Western wrestling have this. They perform it differently. So on the external surface, it looks different because a Western way will always be different to a Chinese way. But if you look at, again, old school Kung Fu, and if you look at Western wrestling, Western boxing, they actually both have. I mean, Wing Chun Kuen is kind of Eastern pugilism. It's pugilism. It's just Eastern style. It's non-Western pugilism. Because if you look at pugilism back in the day, without all the artificial gloves and hand wraps, which people seem to think is realistic, they criticise Chinese Kung Fu and they praise Western boxing without realising that the big bubble thing, which gives you a couple of inches reach, changes your distance, changes your footwork, changes your body position, right? So it's completely altered, changes the impact, cushioning, the feel of it, right? Changes it so much, right? So the fact that they claim that they're the most realistic is a bit bizarre to me. But again, that's, I suppose, I don't know what it is. So Wing Chun Kuen is pretty the real style, the old school, authentic, organic style is Eastern version of pugilism, pretty much. Okay, you look at it, and it is like you've got that, and in Western pugilism, you've got these kind of things. So there's kind of roughly similar in certain situations, right? So it's, again, the arm is kind of low, a bit like Kazamazuki, but it's a natural body movement because it's kind of low and strong, and also the vertical punch is quite natural because the three knuckles and the tricep and the back muscles are all lined up. So it's more on the hip and the body, right? It's yeah. So when you have the gloves on, you can cover tight, but when you don't, there's a big gap, obviously, yeah. Whereas if you had giant gloves on, this gap would be closed by the giant gloves, yeah? Heavyweight, what is it, 15-ounce gloves, whatever, 17, 15, 16, anyway. When you have the big giant bubble, you can cover, right? But without that, then it's not. Now you can do an elbow spike, but that's a different thing with the hand boxing, the hand fist. That cover, as I say, there's a big gap, which is why you see longer stretched posture in Western pugilism, but also Wing Chun Kuen. So we have about a minute left. Not only the judo forearm, but certain aspects of Japanese karate versus Okinawan, the mainland karate, the Japanese style karate. And again, I don't know if this is like a post-war. I feel like it could be a post-war thing. When things become over specialized and over sportified, it's like over artificial, too artificial within a very specialized ring set. You have say a mat, ref, rule, weight class. You have the more artificial it gets, the more specialized it gets, right? But the more removed from its original source that it is. So maybe that explains the lack of natural movement. I'm not sure, but when the arm is away, when you do uchikomi, when the arm is away, again, I'm sure it's good for traditional reasons and for culture reasons, but efficiency-wise, it's not. I mean, I would say the same with the Greco-Roman. To give a Western example, I'm not trying to be unfair towards Japanese leaders. To give a Western example, the Greco-Roman no-gi self-grip here, where you do the arching of the back and the thing. Again, unless you're hyper-flexible or hyper-yoga master, right? I don't think repeated things of that is very efficient, in my view. Okay, so it's, I suppose, also it's to do with the way the bodies move. So if you're someone that isn't, hyper flexible or hyper powerful, there, maybe it's not the best idea to keep doing that move. So I suppose you have to adapt to your body and to your situation, right? Which also I don't see in Western teaching style. It's very one size fits all, very rigid, very, just everyone's got to do this, even if everyone's got to do a long arm technique, even if they've got short arms, or everyone's got to do a short in technique, even if they're like tall and spindly and lanky, right? So there's no nuance in that Western style teaching method, right? No nuance, and the Japanese one as well, with certain systems, not all. Aikijutsu and things is a bit more organic with wrist locks. Okay, it's more natural and more internal. Maybe it's to do with internal and external. I don't quite know, but it's a bit more flowing, but also more efficient. It's more efficient because you don't have to do big giant things. Yeah, you just here and just twist and lock it off, and then it does a takedown. Yeah, in a very direct way rather than the big giant kind of stuff. So final point, and then it ends, is one couple of minutes left, and it's just when this is away, the judo forearm and this uchikomi, again, that's fine and it's traditional, and if that's the class you want to sign, if that's how you want to practice that way, that is the traditional way, right? But all I'm saying is, in terms of efficiency, it makes no sense because, especially if you've got the shoulder is, but even in general, even if your shoulder's okay, when it's separated from the body, it's not strong. So efficiency-wise, I can make no sense of it. Yeah, it looks nice and it's traditional, as I say, but it's not. It's very low efficiency because away from the body, and then you loaded up all their body weight onto your forearm, which stresses into your shoulder because, as you know from physics and fulcrums, if it's far away, FD, force time distance. If it's far away, it will put more pressure and more force on there than it would if it's tight. Yeah, like a door and a hinge. So when you push the door near the handle, then it's got a very low amount of force required because it increases, the FD, because it's far away from the hinge. It requires low amount of force for the observer, for the person holding the handle to push, because it magnifies, levers magnify your power essentially. Yeah, it magnifies your power many times. So for like an armbar, when it's away from the body, it's easy for the opponent to do something, but not for the person to do it. Okay. So when that's away, you're essentially not necessarily arm barring yourself, but you're arm wrenching or shoulder wrenching yourself in a way. Yeah. Just by the nature of what you're doing. So again, I'm not any kind of grandmaster, 10th dan, anything like that. Okay, all I'm saying is efficiency-wise, it just doesn't seem to make any sense at all. Because as I say, you're loading that weight there, right? And it's not. So a tight thing would be like a near side clip, monkey grip, no gi clip here. Yeah, a near side underhook or a far side, yeah. Especially the far side also, if you put that forehead, the Western wrestling style head fighting with the head on the temple and the grinding pressure and the fighting pressure weighing people down, that is quite realistic, right? And it's strong because it's tight in and it's close in. As I say, it's not strong if it's out here. So this has got more to do with, dare I say it, normal culture again, but it's got more to do with this is the way it's done, or this is the way it's always been done. It's got a lot more to do with that than it has to do with efficiency, and it's not good for your joint. Just as a general principle, even if you've got perfect, as I say, from a cultural, traditional perspective, fantastic, but from an efficiency-wise perspective, So if you're doing kata, then yes, but kumite, no. It's got to be. This is, as I say, this is where pugilism, Western pugilism, Wing Chun Kuen, Western boxing, even glove style boxing, right? It's tighter here than, as I say, even with Wing Chun pugilism, when it's here, it's still slightly, the elbows are slightly in, so it's not like up here, right? Because you've just lost your strength when it's up here. Even the Uchikomi band, when you see it lifted up, I understand, again, cultural, traditional perspectives, and again, that's great. And I think, for kata style, I think that's fine to a degree. It's not good, as I say, to do it, to overstress it, because it's not a strong posture. So I think it's got more to do with the mindset of, this is the way it is done, and this is the way it's always been done, so that's just forever now. We're just stuck in that mode, like forever mode, okay? But it does lack a high amount of efficiency. So it looks uglier, the Western style wrestling where it's tight in, or Wing Chun where it's like a futsal or a pack, or the tight in, it might look uglier, not as pretty, but it's way more efficiency, and it's way more practical and pragmatic. It's way more effective and applicable. This again, unless your arms is like silverback gorilla style arms, probably not. And as I say, it just, as a general mindset, it's not good, because when it's separate from the body, it's big stress on there. So it's not a practical move in any way. You can punch. Yeah, you can grip and dig in or punch like an overhand to drive it down. That is a separate thing. Because I'm talking about sort of lifting up and keeping it up. If you punch down like an overhand, whether it's a gi grip or a punch style, right? If you do the overhand, that's slightly different because you're using gravity in you, and you're also, it's tightening in. So even though it starts tight, tightening in. So it sort of strengthens and tightens at the end point. Yeah. Not like not like as I say, an Uchikomi band, or a static partner practice or Uchikomi band. It's, again, for if you're doing kata, then maybe doing applied work. For my body, I can't see it, and I just, as a general principle, again, I can't see it making any sense unless after years and years and years of observation and research and reflection, I can't see it making any sense. Yeah, it's just not a stronger posture. It's not a practical posture. It's a traditional cultural thing, but it's not. It's not efficient. It's not practical. Yeah, and it's not healthy. I suppose anyone can say, well, it's not healthy to do no-gi because you're getting bashed up anyway. Fair enough, that's true. But it's not workable. It's just not workable, really, in general, because it lacks natural movement and it lacks practicality. Yeah, natural movement is kind of more, it's common sense. So natural movement has common sense, which authentic Kung Fu, old school organic Kung Fu has natural movement. Also, Western wrestling, Western boxing, right? Although the problem with the Western boxing and some people would say Greco-Roman is a very specialized, over-specialized rule set that has started to become artificial, which is true. But let's just say in general, the Western way and also like Wing Chun Kuen is more natural. It's common sense approach or common sense attitude with natural body movement. So these things, whether they're like a very sort of trying to get the toes forward and a very locked in hip, and you'll hurt yourself with Gakatsuki, like a very rigid style, which some dojos do, right? If it's really forcing your body and stretching, it's not. It's look at sense. You look at certain and maybe certain outliers who teach the Shotokan or the karate, certain outliers who coach it will do this approach. As I say, doesn't seem to be in general. So certain outlier individuals will do it, but it's not good, the too rigid kind of thing, whether it's, as I say, the Gyaku Suki, or whether it's because it's the same thing at the end of the day. If you're trying to get your toes completely forward and your hip completely locked and your back completely locked in, it's conflicts with your body, right? So Kung Fu and Aikijutsu, right, which is a kind of a Japanese Tai Chi in a certain sense, okay? It's got natural movement and it's more of a common sense, right? So it's kind of relaxed, and it doesn't matter because of like relaxed heaviness and nuance. It doesn't matter if you don't get that 100% perfect kind of, chop, like high toe kind of, or knife hand, or reverse knife hand. It doesn't matter if you get all locked in totally. It's more about the relaxed intent, like relaxed heaviness and then intent, right? Which mind form boxing, Sing Hai Chuan or Xing Yi Chuan, Xing Yi Quan, Sing Hai Chuan, intent. So internal Neijia martial arts is like intent, and then step 2, physical manifestation, like mind intent boxing or intent mind boxing, like Xingyi. Quan is keep. It's more about the intent than necessarily the end product, because in a chaotic sparring way you can't guarantee the end product perfectly. You can just sort of have an intent of, I'm going to kind of, chop, or I'm going to palm straight, or whatever, or lead palm or reverse palm. Yeah. So you can just have a kind of, or high tail or reverse high tail, or chop. Have a the intent, of that's what combinations are for, isn't it? Like, cross, jab, uppercut, or any it doesn't matter. I'm not Western boxing expert on this, but it's the intent that if that's what combinations are for, that if the first one is not there, you've got a backup, rather than just having a solo thing and then there's no backup. So it's the intent rather than the actual perfect thing. So you need nuance, and again, that Western style teaching thing from possibly the school system, and very likely is from that, is it just has no nuance. It's just, you do this technique, 7.334 degrees to perfection, and it has no nuance, has no leeway, it has no common sense. It really, really has zero common sense within that teaching way of style, of method. So there needs to be a new way. As I say, natural movement and common sense is an intent. So those, like, intent and mental toughness, kind of, the mental toughness is almost the Western word for the mind form boxing or mind intent boxing. It's almost a Western word for it. Kind of is a Western word, because if you look at, again, mental toughness in Western wrestling and Western boxing and Western coaching of sports combat in the West, and you look at it in Xingyi and in Chinese Kung Fu and Chinese internal arts, they're almost non-dual. They're almost semi-universal. So there's a kind of a rough non-duality to it. Yeah, it's not exclusive to Chinese philosophy or Western teaching, Western coaching in the dojo. It's not exclusive to one or the other. There's a sort of universality. They just look very different on the surface because they're very different civilizations. Western culture and Chinese nature, internal arts, very, very different on the external viewing surface. But there is a certain sort of non-duality to it, right? On the inside. So yeah, just to say, I think that sort of Western style teaching from probably the schooling system very, very possibly has leaked in for many years to sports combat and to martial sport arts, whatever we call them, and it's making people, especially nervous people, if anyone's very nervous, then it makes the person, even if you've got a good technique to start with, just so nervous and so gaslit and so confused that they've got no self-confidence. So imbuing intent, mental toughness, and self-assuredness, right, is very good. And not being hyper rigid and hyper pedantic. Like, again, middle ground is good. In drilling, yes, you need to do the technique with good form and good posture, but not to the point where it's so rigid that it's a kind of psychological straitjacket. Yeah, so it's got to be common sense and natural body movement, which you see a lot of in, like, a jab is a kind of a natural A shovel hook is another one, yeah. A jab and a shovel hook is quite natural, kind of, yeah. And a palm, you know, a slap. I mean, you take, again, 1 minute left, but you've got, I keep saying that, don't I? But I've just got so many bullet points to get through. I probably really do have to start wrapping it up, but as I say, the bullet points just keep coming before I can get to them, so it's hard to wrap it up. But I'm trying to get to the final point. Natural body movement, a Western style slap. Yeah, if you take that concept, a Western style slap, but you add sort of intent, and then you add like a wall bag, sectional wall bag, you know, or a canvas kung fu bag, you know. So you add that internal intent and the kung fu bag, and you internal and external and intent, and you add technique to it. Then you take that Western style primitive. I don't mean that in a bad way. I just don't have any other words in my brain right now. So-called primitive style Western slap, and you take that and you can train it and train it and train it. Not with this very rigid pedantic, you know, it has to be this technique, but just this relaxed sort of anywhere in this rough area here, like the Tai Chi, brush knee and push step, right? That is a kind of internal iron palm. Hip here and sinking palm, like Wing Chun sinking palm, but it's a Tai Chi palm, but it all sort of links together, right? It's hip and palm, and you know, and this can help, just like in karate, the pulling and the gite hand. So the brush knee can help to. It can also be a grab or a block or a parry, a low block, yeah, a grab or whatever. But you just can sort of. See, it's a short, sharp shock. Fajing, shock power. Okay. Yeah, and it can be done. I like to do it sideways. What can also? It can be done. Yeah, sink and left-handed. Yeah. So it's like shock power. It can be from a feint, from a lead feint, and then a twitch. It's like a kind of. It's hard to explain, but it just sort of sinks. But it's natural. The point is about the Chinese way, the authentic way, not the watered down, say modern way. The real, true, classical way is common sense and natural body movement. Yeah, it's just a Western style slap, but it's with a lot more intent. A lot more intent. Yeah. Again, the internal. It's you take again a sort of external Western style slap, but you add in internal, which the West quite lacks in compared to Eastern thought, right? In general. So it's just relaxed, and it's just like a fac style is forearm, wrist, knife hand, yeah, or palm, heel, yeah. It's just sort of roughly there, and that is how the sparring mindset goes. It's just going to be roughly this area, right? It's not going to be this 0.997733 degrees here. That teaching way is a no-no, really. To be honest, it's a no-no. It's just roughly in this area. You know, you say roughly in this area, yeah. It's going to catch anywhere along here, just like the palm. You say roughly, it's going to catch, you know, chin or chest or shoulder, right? It's just rough guesstimate. Yeah, it's a rough guesstimate. Yeah, here, or there, or there. But it's again, it's relaxed and it's not this hyper rigid, all these decimal places. It's just anywhere in this general area. there, right? And that's the mindset that I don't see in what I started deconstructing at the start. Yeah, is I don't see that mindset of common sense. I really don't see it. Common sense and natural movement. You know, common sense and natural movement. They seem to be lacking in that method of approaching things, that mindset method. You know, that modern Western kind of approach, as well as I say, that kind of move. That one, and as I say, certain types of Shotokan, where it's very, very, you know, not every club, not every school, not every dojo, but there's a certain commonality. There's a rough commonality there. There's a general culture of it. Yeah. Again, not everywhere, but there is a kind of rough general culture of it that it's lost the nuance. It's got no nuance, no leeway. It doesn't add up. So as I say, it's this there, relaxed, or Washizuki, but again relaxed, or the Mawashi Teisho palm, roundhouse palm, or forward facing or back. But it's just again anywhere in that general area, and it just flicks, yeah. Instead of this really specific, like, you know, because again I don't know. So the Austin Go Sensei talks about this, Wing Chun Kwen teacher, Austin Go. There's a video on the internet, and look it up. It talks about, again, not everyone, I understand, but he talks about Western students who are Westerners or from a Western style background, and they just have this, I don't know, it might be English Enlightenment scientism or something, but they have this thing where it's, again, all these decimal places, and they just can't get over nuance and common sense and relaxed steadiness. And it's just like, in this general rough area, there you go, there, and then Dong Sao and there, or Awasowi palm, you know, and then Gyakuzuki, you know, or underneath, you know, Awasowi palm, because I forget the full name, and then Gyakuzuki underneath. But it's just this. Again, there, throw it out there, it's in this rough area, and then see where we are, like a science experiment. Yeah, there, and then maybe it's there, or it's there. Okay, maybe it's there. It's just sort of, you know, it's a snap and a just fudging, you know, really seems, as I say, lost in the, and again, very possibly a post-war thing with very specialization. Yeah. When the martial arts came, specifically Japanese, mainland karate and Japanese Ludo came to the West, maybe it's a post-war thing because it's peacetime, it's demilitarized and it's not practical. Maybe it's partly to do with that, and partly to do with misunderstandings and misprojections, but it's not. It doesn't make any sense in my view, to be quite honest. It hasn't made sense for a while, so I had to kind of talk about that. So throw it out there, and then it's, as I say, that's it. There, or Tan, or Kazanazuki, or Gyaku, or Seoinage, but it's just sort of, yeah, a sort of, yeah, like Tai Chi Chuan, standing stance. It's just sort of relaxed, and it's just hips sink and you sink, and it's just sink, and it's just there, right? Or Wing Chun's standing stance is kind of slightly similar in a certain way. You know, it's just kind of there, right? And then it can be there or there. You know, it's just, again, common sense and natural body movement. Yeah. So common sense and natural body movement really lacking in the points that are made up at the start of the video. Natural body movement, common sense, and nuance, leeway, sort of, you know, it's Very strange, but it does seem to be that way. So if in the end, not just the ND community, but NTs that struggle with it too, with that very strange mindset, practice static, Seoinage or whatever, or Gyakusuki, practice static the way you practice one. Practice them almost identically, and then you won't have confusion. Because if you practice static, all this multiple decimal places perfection, and then you practice applied, and 99.999% goes out the window, then it's kind of almost useless. So practice, shadowing the same as practicing applied. Practice it the same, and have people sitting in a viewing chairs or whatever, maybe a couple of people to simulate a sort of tournament or whatever. Have it as close to the real as possible and do it all the time, and then there won't be any sudden shock surprises jumping out. Have that environment as close to the real as possible all the time, and do it all the time, so that nervousness, and do 10,000, like honestly, do 10,000 Seoinages or 10,000 Kazamazukis or 10,000 Chinese sevens, right? Spade palm, or just do 10,000 reps and get the feel of uki being thrown, or tori, the person doing the throw, the attacker, or the tori, the person receiving uki. Get the feeling of, say, being the uki, receiving thousands of throws, then attacking thousands of Seoinages, then Gyakusuki, then once you've done 10,000 reps, then it'll be in the muscle memory, it'll be relaxed, and it'll be natural movement. And it's that first couple, and especially in the intermediate phase, the blue belt kind of thing, where there's that most nervousness and clunky, which people like me have got stuck in for so long that it's really unhealthy, psychologically speaking. So definitely, as a healthy mental bullet point to people to really help, not only the self, but to help anyone that can learn from this experience, is don't stay stuck at that sort of blue belt mindset, kind of where it's like halfway nervous kind of thing. Trust the partner, don't go with the crazy partner, sparring partner. Trust the partner, make sure they're not just kamikaze kind of attacks where they're just wanting to just go full swing, kind of no structure, no composure. Just watch out for that kind of strong partner. Go with someone who's composed, who's and again, there's a video of someone talking about that. North American judoka talks about that Ludo-ka practitioner. So practice trust, and then practice like 10,000 reps, and then it's in the muscle memory. Then it needs trust is like the number one component, and then practice the 10,000 reps and just get into the mode of doing it, and go with someone that is sort of mentally composed, not someone who just wants to, show ego and show you they can do a sub or a throw and get a nip on or get 10 points. And someone that just wants to win you and not actually help grow as a uki-ame, throw E and throw air. It's a kind of partner dance. So someone who just wants to win you all the time, don't do that. Go with someone who's composed. Do the reps, do the trust exercise. You trust that they're not going to smash with the throw, and so it's number one, trust, then reps, and then 3 is muscle memory. And that is literally the end now, without making it up.